Hello all, good afternoon. Today I am recording the second part of round 11 of Tata Steel Masters 2022, second part of round 11 of Tata Steel Masters 2023, and let's get started. So now we are going to see the game Vincent Rapport. So Keymar, as usual, starts with his d4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, knight d2. So I've noticed that Keymar is often playing some sidelines against these kind of openings. For example, here he's playing e3, c5, bishop e2, and so I think he's kind of trying to play different kind of sidelines. Like for g6, he plays nb d2 to play e4, e5. And I remember there was a game bishop g7, e4, I think d5, and there was some game Vidit Gujarati versus Grandelius from last year's edition. So of Tata Steel Masters, Vidit versus Grandelius, yeah. And but instead, um, Rehat goes for c5. The idea is after c3, cd4, cd4, d5. This sorry, cd4, c cross d4, d5. The knight on d2 can be a little bit ill placed as the knight would rather be on c3 here, and it would require two moves, knight b1 to c3 to reroute it to its ideal position. So after c3, cd4, this position should be absolutely fine for black. So instead, Keymar goes for d cross c5, queen a5, idea to take on c5. Note that white can't play knight b3 here because there is this pin on the a5 even diagonal. So a3, idea to gain space with b4. Here I thought knight c6 is quite interesting because after b4, black can play knight cross b4, a cross b4 and queen a1. Knight b4, if bishop b2, idea to protect and now play a cross b4, then knight c6 and black is doing very well. So after knight c6, it's difficult to say what white to do, but I think he'll play e3 and after bishop g7, bishop d3, there may still be knight b4, but okay, maybe bishop e2, but then it seems that uh, white's play has not been so venomous. Besides, in the game, white developed the bishop to d3 and not to e2. So I thought knight c6 would be interesting in this position. Instead, Rehat played queen c5, which cannot be wrong because it's just taking up central pawn. Also a3, there was a3 queen c5, b4 to gain more space and play bishop b2 to get into the long diagonal. Queen c3 rook b1, bishop g7, bishop b2, all natural developing moves. Queen c7 e3, castles bishop d3. I thought bishop e2 is more natural, but bishop e2 runs into knight d5 as knight c3 threats are kind of looming in the air. I mean, this is not tragic or anything. Knight e4, c4, and fight is fine, but bishop e2 is actually also pretty much playable. I think b6, castles, bishop b7, c4, and natural game. I think actually bishop e2 is kind of more natural here, but instead, Richard goes for sorry, Vincent goes for bishop d3, d6, castles, knight b d7. The idea of knight b d7 is to play b6, bishop b7, and get a hedgehog-like position. So c4, gaining more space in the center, and b6, idea to play bishop b7, and after this, queen b3, idea to get rook d1 or c1 and connecting both the rooks. I mean, connecting means that now these are protected by each other. Bishop b7, rook fe1, rook fe8, rook c1, rook c8. This is the typical plan in this these positions. This is not Maroczy bind right now because Maroczy bind is characterized by pawns on c4 and d4. But this is a bit different. But this is hedgehog because black places his pawns in this way. Usually the pawn is also on e6, but here it's on e7. So it's slightly different, but usually the bishops are fianchettoed, and this is the position of the hedgehog. Black normally claims in this position that the knight on d2 is misplaced because in the hedgehog the knight is on c3, while white may claim that there is more harmony in the position. So h3 just is getting an escape square for the king. Queen b8, bishop f1, queen 8, getting in contact with strategically important squares as was discussed in the last video, which was part 1 of the course. So knight d4, a6, which is very typical. Knight e2, I need to play knight c3, and now this is very interesting because Vincent wants to get the knight to c3 and wants to let the other knight on d2 to get good control over the e4 square. So d5, Vincent Richard decides that this is now the time to open the position and all his pieces are well placed. Knight c3. And now I think that Richard thought for a very long time, which is 26 minutes, and went for what I consider a slight inaccuracy at the very least. He took on c4 here. I believe rook c7 and just playing with rook c8 was more to the point. For example, if white takes, then black takes and takes back with the bishop. But Richard didn't play that. He instead of rook c7, he simply went for d cross c4 and came up to knight c4. Now, if b5, comes knight a5, and this is kind of similar to the Rubinstein knight, which was in the famous classical game of Rubinstein, which I'll put in the description below. But queen b8 was played by Richard, controlling the central square. a4 to gain more space and to prevent activation with b5. Bishop a8. It seems to me that here Richard was kind of losing it during the game, but um, rook cd1, getting another piece into the center, knight f8. This is some kind of a picturesque position as white has most of his pieces towards the center, more or less all of them. Maybe rook e1 you can see not, but black has very little pieces towards the center. And this is one of the reasons why white has an advantage. a5, if b cross e5, then knight cross e5 and the e6 pawn is loose. So knight d7, and here knight e cross b6. Knight cross b6 was very interesting here as well, because after knight cross b6, white can take bishop into a6. Vincent, being a very positionally oriented player, may not have found this totally convincing after knight d7 and rook cross c8, but after b5, it seems white has some advantage here. Although I'm not totally sure if, I mean, it may be better than a b6, but knight b6 doesn't sound totally convincing. Also, bishop b7, queen b7, e b6. I'm not sure if the pawn on b4 would amount to much. I mean, would queen in the future. So it's for sure very interesting, but I don't really take much issue with a cross b6 because knight b6, knight a5, and the a6 pawn is anyway loose. So knight d5 and rook knight d5, bishop d5, rook d5, knight d5, bishop g7. This is important because if instead of 7 white takes on d5, then bishop into b2 and black is doing very well because he has an extra exchange. So bishop g7 is an important intermediate move, and after king g7, queen d5, queen b4. This is a very interesting material balance. So this is rook plus pawn versus bishop and knight, but this is the end game. There are just very few pieces left on the board. Also, right now the rook on e1 is attacked, and white could have played queen d4 here, queen d4 check, queen d4, e d4, and there is some advantage, but it should be held for black, I believe. So instead, Keymar went for rook a1, protecting the knight, and queen c3 was played. I thought rook c5 was also very interesting here to attack the a5 knight, but there is queen d7 here, and black is doing very well. Sorry, white is doing very well, not black. So queen c3, queen a2, restoring coordination among the forces, rook d8. Now bishop a6 was very tempting at first, but here comes rook d2, and now black's plan can be seen in full motion. If white plays queen e3, you can pause the video and see what white would play. Sorry, what black would play. Kudos to you if you found rook d1 check, king h2, and rook into a1, and black wins. While if after rook d1 check, rook into d1, then queen into a3, bishop c8, queen a5, and only black is playing for the win. So instead of queen a3, there comes knight c4, a5, rook b1, rook c5, queen a1, and they trade the queens. And one principle of queen exchanges is that when you are exchanging queens, then what often happens is that uh, the queen exchange favors the side whose king is weaker. And in this position, it doesn't seem clear whose side is weaker, so it comes down to who has more weaknesses. And I think the weaknesses are kind of equal. So the queen exchange doesn't really, it's not really too clear whom it should favor. It should be around neutral, I believe. It should be fine for both sides. So g3, simply aiming to play king g2 or even go bishop g2. e5, king g2, So I said f5, e4, f cross e4, h4, and they agreed to a draw after move 41. So a very interesting game by both sides, and this game ended in a draw. A very interesting game overall, with some very critical moments. I'll just go through some of the main points in the game. So basically, firstly, it was that Keymar was playing some rare openings, but Richard decided to be principled, went for the main lines. I'm not sure about Queen c3. I think Queen c2, Bishop b2, Bishop g7 is also very much playable, and the rook can go to c1, and rook b1 was also fine during the game. So I think both moves are fine, but it's not that big a deal. Queen c3 or no Queen c3. I was a bit surprised by Bishop d3, but otherwise they connected the rooks. They played properly. They played good positional chess, and I really like this move knight d4 with the idea to play knight e2 and knight c3, and sorry, knight e2 and knight c3, and white simply tried to control the important squares. And after a6, knight e2, knight c3, I was not very happy with dc4. I thought rook c7 is sort of more principled here, but after dc4, knight c4, queen b8, they got all the pieces towards the center, and I was feeling that Vincent would be a bit unhappy with this game the way it ended, and he kind of showed that in his post-game press conference that he was not very happy, that he couldn't get much out of the game because it was clear he had an advantage. Another moment was Queen a5 here. Why did after a5 why did White not capture here? You can pause the video and think what Black should do. Kudos to you if you found the move Rook into c4, because if Queen into c3, Rook into c3. If bishop into c4, then some may think that queen c4, but there is queen into d8 and white wins. But the most important thing is, if you pause the video for long enough, you would see that black had rook d1 check, king h2, and queen into a1, and black wins. While if rook into d1, then queen into a5, and we get a similar material balance to one we saw, where black is definitely better and is pushing. Instead, white played rook b1, rook c5, and after this, there wasn't much to play for, and Richard defended very properly. Also, you have to see the move e4, because if not e4, black will play e4, gain more space, and ask quite some tough questions. So overall, a good game by both sides, which ended in a draw. And this was the recap of the fifth board of table of round number 11 of Tata Steel Masters 2023. Now let's get to the next game. So here is game Ding Liren versus Yuren van Foorest from the sixth table of 11th round. So Ding goes for d4, which is a bit surprising because all the tournament he went for e4, but he went for d4 against Yuren, d5, c4, the slab defense, the bishop f5 scallop defense from Yuren, knight c3, e6, knight h4, bishop e4, f3, bg6. Now one thing I noticed was Yuren played bishop g4, queen b3, queen b3, d cross c4 against Pragnananda in Champions Chess Tour, but this is probably fine for white. And Pragnananda also got an advantage, but it was a very complicated game. But Yurin went for bishop e4, f3, bishop g6, bishop d2, which is a trendy line. Earlier, the main line was always to play queen b3. Then they played queen b6, or even queen c7 was the main line. I mean, main line in the sense all the top level games used to play queen c7, but queen b6 was also very interesting. Instead, Ding went for bishop d2, which was the recent trend because white remains flexible, can go queen to c2 or b3. For example, after nbd7, ng6, hg6, there is the move queen c2, which is quite playable also. Instead, Ding simply goes after knight bd7, knight cross g6, h cross g6, and now queen b3. And now there is this move d cross c4, which is very relevant. It's a new idea. And if white plays bishop into c4, there comes b5, bishop e2, a6, and black goes for c5 like ideas. So after d cross c4, queen cross b7, taking this pawn, c5, and Yudin said he had all this prepared. After knight b5, I did knight c7 check, rook b8. If queen a7, then rook b5 is good for black because he's simply a piece up. So knight c7 check, king e7, queen into a7, queen c8. I did to round up the c7 knight, d cross c5, rook b7, queen a3, idea to play c6 check, queen into c7. Here somewhere it was said that queen a5 was Yuden's preparation, and Yuden said in his post-match press conference, but he thought that this line has good health and is in good shape. So it remains to be seen what is there after queen a5, but post-game analysis and more practical experience will show that. So after d5, rook b7, queen a3, queen c7, c6 check, king e8, and after this they traded pieces, bishop b4. Because of queen c4, then bishop d2 and rook b2, and black is doing very well here. So after queen c2, they played queen e5, I did take on e3, and after bishop b4, I think they could have played. Yuden could have played rook b4, and black is doing very well. For example, after long castle, simply queen e3 check, queen d2, and I think only black can be better in this position. Sorry, king d2, there is rook b2 check, and if rook into d2, then king e7, and black has an extra pawn. Sorry, black does not have an extra pawn, but I think that black has a lot of activity. So instead, in the game, you didn't play queen e3 check, queen e2, 3 pieces. This is an important moment. It's very clear, it's extremely clear that white's king is weaker. So white exchanges queens, and it's preferable to him. Instead, if bishop b2, rook into b4, black is doing very well, as this queen is much better than the c2 queen. As the e3 queen is much better than the c3 queen, and the king is much weaker. So queen e2, bishop b2, rook b4, long castles, king e7, idea to play rook b8 next, or rook a8. So rook d2, idea rook h d1, g5, controlling the important points, f4 and h4, and preventing h4, rook c2, knight b6, and after a3, rook a4, king b1, rook h4, g3, rook h3, idea if bishop f1, then you go back, but simply to put some pressure and ask white how he has to proceed. And after rook a5, bishop e2, rook c5, and he could still have played on, but it's frankly not that much. So after bishop e2, rook a4, bishop d1, they just exchange pieces. So very interesting game, very typical of Yuden van Foorest, who comes up with the new opening idea. Also to be noted is during the tournament, earlier he had played a6 against Prague, but after bishop d2, he had ended up losing the game. So he played e6, what he usually plays, and he played his main lines, and he played d cross c4, which is a novelty, and it seemed that uh, Yuden is playing this dc4 ideas very frequently after white commits with queen b3. For example, this bishop g4, queen b3, dc4 was also Yuden's invention, although it didn't really gain much traction. And now queen b3 and now dc4. So this is some trend in Yuden's ideas in this lab, and a good game overall by Yuden, and a good hold by Ding, but mostly I would say good prep by Yuden, and very good game overall, which shows how top level works nowadays. So this was the 11th round. This was the sixth table of the 11th round. Now the last round was the one Erigaisi-Gukesh and D-Gukesh. So Erigaisi goes for e4, e5, and he goes for the Royal Lopez, and Gukesh goes for the popular Berlin defense. I believed myself that Gukesh can play many things, and he may actually play the Sicilian because he has played this many times, or he would play knight f3 e6, and that's also something he's played multiple times. But he goes for e5 and the Berlin. Now, Idigaisi thought for around 5 minutes, for 5.5 minutes for castles. d3, bishop c5, and he may not have felt that confident here. While after cast, and he may have some ideas in castles, so I don't really blame this choice. And after d5, knight b5, a4, earlier people used to play this with white to just force a draw. For example, after d5, there is this popular line e cross d6, knight d4, queen d4, queen d6, queen e4 check, queen e6, queen d4, queen d6, and they just repeat moves this way. And there have been multiple games when this has been agreed drawn. So initially I was a bit unhappy that they were playing like that, but Arjun here shows his main new idea, c3, and he wants to simply play f4. And also this is an interesting line because Fabiano showed some idea against Linnea Dominguez in the US Championship, but um, Erigaisi goes for c3, and after c3 they play bishop e7, f4 to bolster the center more, and to also somewhere go f5, and not here, but somewhere after bishop e3, knight d to knight f3. So castles bishop e3, f6, breaking center, knight d2, idea of f cross e5, then knight cross e6, b cross e6, and now f e5. And black's structure is sort of spoiled, although I believe this can also be playable for black. But after knight d2, they play knight cross d4, bishop cross d4. This is a little bit controversial, I believe, because c cross d4 is more in tune with what white has played previously. But here, black can play, I think, c6 and a5, and black should be okay with the two bishops. Also, I was thinking early bishop f5, but I thought maybe queen b3 can be played. But then rook b8, and it's not that big a deal, actually. Bishop f5, there is g4, which is very interesting, I believe. Although it's much more committal as well. And white has good pawn advance. So cd4, I think c6 is more. Oh, actually, bishop f5 with g4, probably bishop d3 should be good for black. So this is not that good, but queen b3 rook b8. I think they can play, and queen b3 rook b8, and black should be doing very well. And now g4 can't be played because queen is on b3, not on d1. So I think this is okay for black. So Arjun goes for bishop d4, c5, and now if bishop f2, then f cross e5, and black is perfectly fine. Bishop e6 will come, queen d7, and he'll connect both the rooks. Black is absolutely fine. Also, bishop f5 is possible instead of bishop e6. ef6 by Arjun. cd4 by Gukesh. Bishop into f6, there is bishop into c5, winning a pawn for white. G into f6 weakens the king, so it's not ideal to play like this. So cd4, f e7, queen e7, queen f3. If c cross d4, queen e3 check, and black is doing very well here. And the position is fine, absolutely fine, no problems. So queen f3, d cross c3, queen d5 check, and you can pause your video and see what white would play, black would play. Kudos to you if you found the move bishop e6 here, and black is doing very well as the knight is going on the next move. The variation is still not over, and after queen e5, c cross d2, f5, rook a8. I think black is doing very well here and should be nearly winning. So after queen cross c3, queen f6, queen d3, queen b2. This was a risky operation, queen b2, as I thought he may play bishop e6, and the position is good. But he goes for queen b2, queen d5 check, king h8, and he wants to claim that the position is too simplified to get something. Knight c4, bishop e6, because of queen into e6 here, which is interesting. There is queen d4 check, king h1, and here rook e8, and black is doing very well. So queen e5, queen e5, knight e5, rook c8, and rook f2, rook c5, but it seems only black can be pressing now for anything. So now he tries to create a passed pawn, b5, if knight d3, then simply rook c3, a5, rook d8, getting the pieces in contact with the center again, rook b2, king g8, getting rid of back rank weaknesses, and also awaiting the f7 square for the king, h3, bishop c8, knight f3, rook f8, I need to provoke g3, which after which black can take. So rook b4, a6, rook e7, rook f5, idea attacking f4, and after some adventures, it seemed white has a little bit something because the pawns are very advanced, but it wasn't ever enough for more. For example, here, also it must be said that Gukesh defended very resolutely, and after all of this, what happened was that they were playing very resourcefully, both of them, and black was aiming to play bishop a4 next, and if 95, then also bishop a4. So 92, bishop a4, rook c2, king e1, b3, knight b3, bishop into b3, and they agreed with draw for a draw. Rook c3 here is also very much possible, but after 94 there can be some annoyances with rook b7, 96 check ideas. And bishop b3 was a good clean move because after rook into b3 there will be after rook into b3 there will be c5 and rook a2, sorry, and it should be a draw. Because after check, just king f7, check, king f8, and it should be held pretty easily. So good game by both sides, which helps us to understand what were the intricacies that went through, and a very interesting game, a very interesting round, round 11. I'll be soon here with posting the highlights of the round 12 of Tata Steel Masters 2023. And thank you all for watching and for being there. And I wish you liked the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And please stay updated as I would be posting the round 12 highlights very soon. Thank you. Bye.